Happy that you all decided to turn up today for the Comun workshop. But first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start off by introducing myself. My name is Amanda Amarawansha, and I make up one part of the Secretariat.
Good morning, prospective delegates and admins. I'm Dil Hetiarch, and I'll be your head of administration for Comun 2018.
Furthermore, our third and final member of the Secretariat is Mitsuka Tilakaratna, who will be the President of the General Assemblies. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today due to a medical emergency. So, ladies and gentlemen, firstly and priorly, before we begin, I would like to make it clear that this workshop is focused on introducing the committees, our rough topics, rather than the basic procedural elements, which will be addressed at a later date, particularly within the first practice debate. So, ladies and gentlemen, to start it off, I would like to introduce our theme, which will be
It's reinvigorating humanitarianism. So just enjoy the video that we prepared for you.
Thank you very much.
Fundamental principles of peace, justice, and human rights,
poverty, illiteracy, disease, and inequality do not belong in the 21st century.
Democracy, more than any other form of government, delivers for our citizens.
ladies and gentlemen, that was the introduction video to Comun 2018 and Comun in general. And now I'd like to invite the Secretary General, Amanda, to actually introduce the General Assemblies.
Ladies and gentlemen, prior to reaching that step, I would like to firstly and foremost deal with the man who came up with that theme this year and explain it to you all, and that is Danida Widnavasan.
So, very good morning again. I need the podium. I have a few facts and figures to present to you all, so I'll be here for this presentation. Very good morning. All of you all look a bit serious. It's fine to be serious, but too serious, I guess. So how was it thus far? Very little to comment on. Okay, it's fine. So reinvigorating humanitarianism barely requires a very deep. Just to point out, we'll have another video presenting exactly with regards to what the theme is. Before that, I'll make this very brief description, right? So since this is a workshop, I'll go on the lines of what a workshop should encompass. So firstly, before I begin my presentation, I would just like to point out that Mitsuka couldn't be here. He's our President of General Assembly. Along with Amanda and Dinul, they have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to put this all together from this moment onwards up until conference. You have now been given the first, let's say, the first experience, the first impression of what our conference is going to look like. And trust me, given the committees that have been simulated and given the sort of topics that have been put into play, the new sort of grounds that we are covering, it will definitely be an upgrade from what was happening during the previous year, right? So, reinvigorating humanitarianism. On a first impression basis, you will understand that it goes on the lines of giving new life to what humanitarian is, to what being a humanitarian is, of supporting and ameliorating human welfare. That is basically what humanitarianism would go on the lines of, right? It's a concept. So why bring this into Model United Nations? You will all recall that the previous theme was combating bellicose rhetoric, and a few years back, I believe it was equitable justice, right? So the reason why we go on these lines of Colombo operated Model United Nations is given the sort of freedom that the Secretariat gives its chairs to move into new grounds, we believe that this should be in fact dealt with. So now let me get into some real problems, right? Starting off with our own country. So I was fortunate enough to go through the UGC report on the graduates, the UGC being the University Grants Commission of our country, of the graduates that come out of local universities for a year, right? So it goes on the lines of 42,319. That is roughly the external degrees and the bachelor degrees and the postgraduate. The postgraduate and the bachelor degrees, right? From our country, keeping aside all the private universities and all of that, just the government state universities. There are about 42,319 graduates every year. So the question, actually the former chairperson of the Security Exchange Commission, Dr. Nala Godeheva, he made this point, and I sort of, it really hit me. So I thought I would share it amongst among our fellow immunists, right? My apologies, I forgot to welcome our faculty advisors, our delegates, and our student coordinators. My apologies. So moving on. The reason why I pointed this issue in terms of graduates, not an issue but a statistic, right? But the point the doctor made was the current unemployment in our country is 380,594. Like today, the statistic I took on the graduates were in 2015. So his point was, if all of us, if all the graduates, specifically, if the professionals that are going into a professional career, at least took the effort to create one job in the market, right? In today's market. There's no big economic mystery here. At least to create one job. If they can go into that sort of level, given the sort of sanctioning that the government provides for these graduates, at least if they could create one job, we could seriously curb this entire issue with unemployment. That is the point he made. So since you all are professionals, since you all have made this decision to join Model United Nations, I believe you all have that sort of potential. I believe you all have thought on grounds that are bigger than yourselves, which is why this sort of theme should be brought to you, right? I understand sort of rhetoric, sort of arbitrary rhetoric that Model United Nations goes on sometimes with its themes. But this time, we actually made a point to have a theme that makes sense, that actually can get all of you all involved. Now, understanding the SDGs, I'm not going to go into that a lot, but I've been able to talk with a lot of the UN representatives in this country, and what they mention is that the SDGs, a concept in itself, why it's practical is not because there are a certain amount of goals, but the fact is there are thematic actions plan under it that all of us can contribute into. So one of the points I wanted to make was regarding these graduates. So my second point for today, I'm not big on reading. I don't read a lot of books, but when I do have the time, I do read. So I came across this splendid book. I hope all of you all get the chance to read it. It was called Blood Oil, written by a Harvard graduate. He did his PhD in Harvard. His name was Leif Wenner. I don't know if has anyone read it? No. So anyway, just to give you all a briefing on the sort of world that you all are in right now, right? So it's a very it gets you thinking. It got me thinking. So I'm just going to share it with you all. The point he on poverty. His point was on poverty. So just to go with the humanitarian aspect of UN, right? He said, imagine a 10-year-old boy, right? And imagine that he met a new person every second from 10 years to the year 75. Every second he meets a new person. His point was, even then, that boy will not have met all the people under poverty today. So that accounts to 2,360,000,000 odd seconds. The individuals under poverty today, living under $2 a day today, is close to 2.4 billion. Living under $3 is close to 3 billion, half of humanity, right? So just to give you all a broader picture of where you all are, and as MUNs, as individuals who are taking things bigger than their curriculum, bigger than their school curricular activities seriously, I believe these are things that you all should be notified of, right? So a lot of content is going to be thrown at you all, a lot of interesting and new things, but understand this, here at Colombo Model United Nations, we don't cater to a novice delegate, we don't cater to only the best odd delegates out there. But what we do is we bring out the best in everyone that comes to these conferences. And that is what Comun did for me. And as executive committee, we work hard to give that to the next individuals who come in as delegates. Right? So I'm not going to take a lot of your time. I believe within your topics, when you research, I have been telling this to the schoolmate, to the students in my school as well. When you're going to research, make it a point to, okay, you have to study, you have to do a lot of other things, but make it a point to identify something new, to bring in something new into committee, okay, to understand what really you all are doing here. The reason why I'm telling this is, I understand that you'll have to invest a lot of money when coming to these conferences, right? And that is why we work very hard in order to either reduce it or to give you all, if you all are paying a certain amount, to at least give you all much more than you all receive, you all invest, right? To give in something more, something for you all to take home. We had that experience, which is what we are trying to give back, right? So just to identify these things now, we could move into the philosophy of what being human is now. Have you all heard of Immanuel Kant? The philosopher Immanuel Kant? I'm pretty sure most of you all must have heard about. So his idea of who a human is, why a human is more dignified than everyone else, is the individual's ability to reason, right? And that is exactly what we want at Comun. That is exactly what we do here at Model United Nations. Your ability to reason, your ability to go into research, your ability to do things that other individuals of your age wouldn't be doing, right? I hope you all get that sort of idea when you all come into this conference. So in my time as an MUN, we were either senior, we were either junior, we always came to a workshop. We always did. We never missed, if we were doing a conference, we came for the workshop. And that's because we gave some respect, because we actually took something home. So that is what I want you all to, as well as Amanda, Mitsuka, and Dinu, along with the other executive committee members, want you all to do. So I'm going to conclude, I hope I wasn't too long. I'm going to conclude with a quotation. I'm pretty sure most of you all have heard of it, but for the individuals who haven't, have you all heard of Martin Niemöller? You must have heard of his very famous quotation there, the ones who have heard about him. So I will anyway relate it to you all at this point. He's a German anti-Nazi pastor, the way I recall. Yes. So I'll make his quotation with regards to the sort of gravity that you as MUNS should understand when you come to a conference. Right. I hope this is not all jargon, but I want you to understand that you all with your minds can do a lot more than you all think. We were also in the same stages. We came through the same stages. So just listen to his quotation, right? What he says is, this is what his quotation goes. I quote, "First, they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there wasn't anyone to speak on my behalf." So I hope you'll absorb something from that quotation. I hope you'll absorb the fact that the sort of idea that you took to come for a conference to talk about problems of other individuals, problems that other people face, you'll understand from the topics. We have very, very diverse in terms of the committees and the topics specifically. I hope you'll understand the sort of gravity and the responsibility that you'll have as an MUN. So I wish all of you all the very best in the upcoming conference. Obviously, all of you all can't win awards, as in all of you all have potential, but not everyone gets to walk away with an award. But what should be kept in mind is every conference, take a lot more, give a lot more than you have been doing in the previous conference. Right? I would like to hand over control back to our Secretary General. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, prior to introducing our very first GA, GA3, I shall begin by making an announcement. After all three GAs have been introduced, we'll have a brief question and answer session. So if any delegates feel the need to ask a question from their chairs, they can do so. And likewise, after the spec com's finished, there will be a brief question and answer session in case anyone has any pertinent questions to ask from the chairs. And furthermore, towards the end, after the formal procedure has finished, we'll have an interactive session briefly outside in the foyer. So firstly, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the chair members for GA3, Janak De Silva, Pankuri Khatpial, Tanishq Muhunta.
Just before we start, can everyone hear me without the mic? Yeah? At the back? Can you hear me? Okay, good. I see a few people with pens and paper already out. I encourage everybody else in the audience also to take it out because, like Danidu said, there's going to be a lot of information thrown at you by a lot of people, on the chats. So everyone can remember everything. So I encourage you to take out a piece of paper, a pen if you have, or just use your phone to note down something, right? It's going to help. Okay, so just to start off, how many novices are in the audience today? Hands up, please. Raise your hands. Have no experience whatsoever, not been to Comun before. Just raise your hands. Okay. Yeah, okay. That's good. GA3 this year is the novice committee. We knew that there were going to be lots of novices coming to MUN this year, coming to Comun, looking for a very good experience for their first time MUN. Therefore, we have made GA3 this year the novice committee. So what have we done, right? The four topics that we have chosen for PD 1, 2, 3, and 4 are actually very easy topics to understand. You can go home, you can research on them, and you can find tons of information on these things. And it's really easy to understand these topics. But that does not limit the scope of debate in any way. There's still a really large range of debate that we can go on. What is GA3? Anybody know? Okay. GA3, General Assembly 3. We deal with issues that refer to social, humanitarian, and cultural issues. And what links all these things? People. We are the people community. We deal with the issues of the people. We deal with stuff like rape, sexual abuse, refugees, famine, droughts, all of that. People crises, right? Because people need help all around the world. Like Daniel said, 3 billion people today live with under $3 a day. That's what? 500 rupees. They live under 500 rupees a day. How would you like to live like that? You really wouldn't, right? That's what we at GSG aim to do. We aim to improve the lives of the people around the world, the people who are suffering. And that is what any delegates of GA3 will be expected to do by us as your chairs. Okay. Coming to practice debate 1. Our topic for practice debate 1 is discussing the rise of right-wing nationalism and its humanitarian implications. Does anybody in the audience have an idea what that means? Anybody?
Anyway,
Yeah, that's right.
I guess when you have, so I'm a faculty advisor,
Yeah.
when you have nationalistic rhetoric which separates people from others and creates the other and the outsider, how does that impact how you approach humanitarian initiatives which are about everyone and not about other and separating people?
Exactly. Okay. That's what right-wing nationalism is in fact about. So, right, this topic is about politics, right? Politics does fall under the mandate of GA3 simply because when you have politics, the government affects the people. And when you affect the people, you affect the entire world. So whatever decision the government takes will affect everyone, right? So there, in general, in politics, there are two sides, right wing and left wing. And there's also a bit in the middle. So right-wing nationalists are also called conservatives. They tend to focus their beliefs on the fact that not all men were created equal. So that there is a social hierarchy in place in society. And whenever they take decisions for the government, they base the ideas on this in general. Left-wings or liberals believe that all men were created equal. And when they take decisions for their government, they focus on creating equality for their country. Now there is no bias, right? The right wing and left wing, there are both positives and there are negatives. But in GA3, this year for practice debate 1, we want you to, as delegates, come well researched on the difference between right wing and left wing nationalism and what exactly its benefits and its problems to pose to humanitarian, humanity, right? Because what happens when you have different governments throughout the world, not everybody is going to agree with another nation, and this is going to affect the world, right? So as delegates of GA3, we want you to come well versed how you can work together with other nations without infringing on another nation's sovereignty, and therefore improve the lives of a lot of people around the world. That is essentially what practice debate 1 is about. Moving on to practice debate 2.
Yes, so I'm going to use the mic. Practice debate 2 is addressing the addressing sexual abuse, gender-based violence, and rape culture, and addressing its possible solutions. Gender-based violence is a widespread phenomenon around the world. Rape is basically defined as the action of offending someone sexually or penetrating one without their consent. This is a really big issue around the world right now, especially since rape culture has a very big historical aspect to it. It started once as a way of punishing women, transgressing moral and ethical codes, and was used in many environments. Now, in the 21st century, it's been disregarded and known as a human rights violation. Some cultures still do it, and it is still normalized, but others are made to prevent it. Our job as a GA is to form a resolution, to find common ground between between nations, and write up a genuine, consentful, and equal resolution to prevent the increase of this issue. What we expect from our delegates is to know the origination of rape culture, where your country stands, not violating any foreign policies when writing up solutions, and including any sort of regards to humanitarian aspects when dealing with such a problem. And now we will be moving on to practice debate 3, which is. You don't want it?
Can you guys hear me at the back? Yeah? Alright. So PD3 is basically, it's addressing the humanitarian repercussions caused by climate change, with special emphasis on the displacement of people due to climate change. Now, living in the 21st century, we see the technology is progressing at a fast rate, and we see that we, as individuals, we care more about ourselves than we care about other people or our surroundings. Now, we see that climate change is on the rise, and it's affecting us. It might not affect you individually in the next, say, 2 years, but in the coming 20 years, it's definitely going to affect the way you're living. Now, what we need to understand is that to solve any problem, the first step is to understand what the problem is. Now that that has been done, we need to address the solutions of that problem. Now, however, we see that there are countries such as the United States of America who don't even recognize that this is a problem. And this comes as a
big issue in today's day and age, right? Because if you don't believe in climate change, what's going to happen? The world is changing as it is. Ice caps are melting. The sea levels are rising, and what's going to happen? Countries go underwater, right? Taking for example Bangladesh. Bangladesh floods. Three-fourths of Bangladesh floods every year. Okay, and this is linked directly to our conference topic, which is in fact.
Which is the Rohingya crisis. The final conference topic is right. Right. Protecting the human rights of the Rohingyas with special regards to ethnic cleansing, displacement, and legal status. So, go on.
Am I to assume that everybody in the audience actually knows what's happening in my account? I hope everybody does know what's happening because it's a really big issue, right? But I'm just going to paint you a picture of what's happening. Imagine that this is in fact a village community, okay? And that we are all part of the same Rohingya community, and that we are all having a meeting, okay? Your friends and your family are around you. They're all surrounding you. Everything is peaceful, okay? And then all of a sudden, through that door, burst in 4 armed soldiers with guns firing. They start randomly shooting people. You don't know what's happening. You duck and you run. You don't know who's following you. You don't know who's in front of you. But you're just running for your life. What's happening, right? You don't know. And this is what the Rohingyas go through every day in Myanmar. And they've been going through this for the past 20 years. You leave your home, you leave it burning in ruins, and you flee to the nearest possible safe haven. And this is why we have brought this up as a topic for GA3 this year. Because it's really important that we understand what's happening to the Rohingyas in this day and age, right? It's essentially ethnic genocide what's happening. And sorry.
Alright, so you may ask, who are the Rohingyas? They're an ethnic Muslim group from Myanmar. And in 1948, when Myanmar gained independence, the Rohingya state was officially recognized as illegal Bengali immigrants. And simply, the Myanmar government did not want them because of the extreme poverty they were causing due to overpopulation and no exact employment or gain in financial aid. So since then, the Rohingyas have been stateless, and because the Rohingyas were recognized as refugees to Myanmar, they have been trying to seek asylum. They have been unable to travel freely or gain any sort of work or education from other lands outside the set concentration camps in Myanmar. They've fled. In 2012, nearly 1.68 million Rohingyas fled Myanmar to Bangladesh, India, and many other more countries in search of a new home. And the search for these people have still continued as they have no home yet. And this topic is going to be discussed with
Right, so we expect the delegates to understand what Rohingya crisis is properly and obviously. So what we need the delegates to do when they come into conference is know the country, whatever country you're from, the country stands on that topic, what the country is trying to do to help those people, whether or not your country is granting asylum to those people, and
there's such a thing as ethnic cleansing, right? That's what's happening in Myanmar right now. If you are going to come to GA3, and we highly encourage you to do so, if you are a novice, we as chairs want you to research on what's happening there, right? Ethnic cleansing is not a good thing whatsoever, right? It's essentially the killing of one specific population of people by that nation, right? There are many methods of combating ethnic cleansing, and we want you to become well versed on these methods of combating ethnic cleansing, as this has happened in the past. But we don't want solutions that have been brought up in the past, because they are just not going to work in the future, right? Because in the future, times are going to be different. So we need to think ahead. So that is what we want delegates of GA3 to be able to do, right? We want you to be able to think ahead and formulate solutions that will be able to help these people, the Rohingyas that are in grave danger every day of their lives, help them to get their lives back to the way they were. But at the same time, we do not want you to violate your foreign policy or another nation's sovereignty in doing so, right? There are many methods of doing this, and we as chairs of GA3 want you to become well versed in doing so. Okay, so just to summarize, we told you what GA3 is, and we told you about the 3 practice debates. I don't want any of you, if you are coming to GA3, to miss a practice debate, because all the practice debates are linked in some way to the conference topic. Because like the politics of a government does affect how the people move around, and the Rohingyas some of the Rohingya women are actually being subjected to sexual abuse by the militants of Myanmar's government, as well as taking for example Bangladesh, which is subjected to a vast amount of climate change impacts. They are unable to support the large number of Rohingya refugees who are fleeing to Bangladesh, right? So all our topics are interrelated, and we want you to come well research on all 4 of them, if you are coming to GA3, right? And that's basically all we have to say. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you, Jazz of GN3. Now I would like to introduce to you a committee that has been done in the past, and I would like to start off by introducing a familiar face, Danidu Witnawasam, from chairing GA4 alongside Soja Raja Karuna and Hussein Essufuali.
So good morning everyone, welcome to GA4. So Daninda will give you a brief background on what the committee is all about.
Okay, good morning again. I trust that this is the last time you'll have to see me. Yes, well, you guys don't have to be this, these faces could change, right? So the 4th General Assembly is a very serious committee, just to go along with your mood. I will not take too much time, but I'll just highlight, because in terms of the workshop, we'll have to go across on how, because in order to aid the student coordinators in sending in delegates, right? So just keep in mind, we did a GA4, and we have been doing GA4s at Comun a few years back, I remember, quite some time back. So a sort of refresh of the GA4 that we did last year to this year is the simple fact that the GA4's mandate has not properly been identified by most delegates, right? So when you say GA4, you just strictly go into this decolonization or that sort of political aspect to it, right? And probably outer space as well. So the reason you'll recognize from our practice debates, and our chairs will explain it to you as well, there's a larger scope when it comes to the 4th General Assembly, right? Be it information, be it development agendas, be it peacekeeping. There's a bigger scope to this, and a very specific scope as well. So as a chairperson, what we firstly look for in delegates is that they identify where, there's a reason why there are mandates for committees, right? There's a reason why there's sort of cut into specific areas, so that a specialized discussion happens in those areas. So one of the primary things I'd like to point out at this point is that delegates who come to the 4th General Assembly should be well versed with crisis management. And I will go along into why this is so, right? If we can have the first practice debate. So before we go into that, I just again point out the simple fact that we have covered aspects like the outer space, information, peacekeeping, all of that we have put into the topics. And the reason we have assembled the topics in that sort of fashion is the reason for that to happen is it's up. So the reason for that to happen is that from practice debate 1, I believe the futuristic committees will have this much more in requirement, but even in this committee, from practice debate 1, you will realize that the first practice debate goes on the lines of the conference topic that we did for GA4 last year, right? So with regards to practice debate 1 to practice debate 2, there is a growth, and the conference topic requires research, requires in the sort of exposure to the previous topic. So without further ado, I'll give handover control to Hussein, who will do the first practice debate.
So guys, how many of you in the audience like space or want to learn about it? Great.
It's the perfect committee for you. So now for the second practice debate.
Yes. So the second practice debate reads the question of public information policy of the United Nations, right? So it's up on presentation. So what you have to identify is we have been doing it for quite some time, even the extra members. So when we sort of troubleshoot our topics, right? One of the significant things we need to know is whether we simulate a committee in a conference, and do we really go into the sort of grounds that it actually covers. So what you should understand from here and towards the conference topic of a development peacekeeping agenda for the United Nations is that there is a lot of territory that hasn't been covered by delegates, right? There's a lot of growth that delegates will go through here at the fourth General Assembly, because given all other committees, not to put any committee down, all committees are living Colombo United Nations has equal standing, equal caliber, but what should be understood that within the topics that we are putting forward, the motions that we put forward here at the fourth General Assembly, specifically moving ahead with the practice debates, is that there's a lot of research that delegates haven't brought into conference as of yet, right? A lot of research that is available, a lot of discussion that should have been done with regards to conference. So something that Hussein also pointed out with regards to the outer space topic and moving forward from there is the fact that the fourth General Assembly, along with committees like the third General Assembly, have other counter bodies, organs under it, which they have as countries come together into putting forward, like the UNHRC from the General Assembly 3. So even other mandated organs. So in the same way, delegates don't really go forward into understanding the scope or the power of the United Nations, right? Not power as in it being an umbrella organization, the sort of exposure that the United Nations already has. So here in the second topic, given the public information policy of countries, of domestic policy and of international policy, we feel that there is a lot of territory that the delegates will go into. So that is something that is specifically kept in mind. Moving to the third practice.
Moving on to the third practice debate, it's basically about autonomous regions and the decolonization of non-self-governing territories. So basically, delegates will be expected to assess the current social and political and legal status of these autonomous regions and just draw conclusions on where the United Nations stands on these matters and how much authority the UN holds in changing the situation. So basically, what delegates should first focus on is actually finding clear-cut definitions for the taxonomy presented in the topic. And as chairs, we feel like this would really guarantee an organized and defined flow of debate. And also another pertinent issue with regards to this topic would be the concept of self-determination and how exactly this links in with autonomy. So basically, delegates will have to draw conclusions on the social, political, and legal standards of these regions and actually figure out if this form and this degree of rule is necessary or justified or, on the other hand, insufficient. And also note that while the topic specifies South Ossetia and Abkhazia, line of debate won't actually be narrowed down to only these two regions. Delegates are free to bring up any relevant cases that would help debate. So moving on to the conference topic, delegates will essentially be reviewing the conduct of peacekeeping as a whole. Now, the reason that we've added the words neo-global peacekeeping agenda is due to the fact that most chairs came to the consensus that there's no set in stone, clear-cut agenda for peacekeeping as of now, despite everything that the world has been going through. So, yeah, that's why. So, we believe that delegates should be obviously well versed in preventive and application-based measures that the Security Council and the African Union and other such bodies have taken with regards to peacekeeping. And also the UNPKF is a very relevant topic area that delegates should be well versed in. With that being said, while the UNPKF should definitely enter discussion, we would advise delegates to not really focus on the humanitarian aspect of it, aka human rights violations and such, but more to focus on constructive and preventive measures that we can take.
So for the conference topic, essentially what we want from a delegate is to be committed to the research, because GFO's mandate is so broad and so it covers a lot of mandates of the other committees as well. So rather than not focusing on one area
concentratively, you can go all around the areas. So when you research, what we want to see is not just limited to what's in the study guide, but you're going beyond that. So because what happens then is committee becomes more interesting. There's a better flow to it and your resolution becomes much more comprehensive. And what we get from that is a delegate who is well versed in their knowledge, practical thinking, and creative logic. So Daninder will close up this and we hope to see you soon.
Okay, I think they're quite comprehensive. Just to point out a few facts, just understand that on the operation aspect of peacekeeping operation, that the Security Council in fact approves and it comes into play in real life, right? In terms of that and in terms of thematic procedures that take place within the United Nations and in terms of a lessons learned sort of approach to the topic, as in a proper reviewal of the sort of documents. Now, the study guide properly highlights these specific reports that have been coming into the United Nations, right? There have been significant approaches made by the United Nations, specifically the General Assemblies, with regards to this specific topic, but the peacekeeping topic, right? But not something quite concrete, I should say. So that is where we, as a committee, when we simulate the General Assembly 4, we'll be looking forward to. And that is where all the requirement for that previous topics comes into play, right? So I believe that is it. I hope you'll have a spectacular day. We'll hopefully get to have interactive session further on in the workshop, right? Thank you. I hand over control to our Secretary.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And the next committee that I would like to introduce is the United Nations Assembly on Drugs and Crime. This is an interesting committee that has never ever been simulated in Comun or MUN in Sri Lanka. It deals with the rapidly globalizing drug trade and so on and so forth regarding the economical, practical, social implications of it. And it's one of the most interesting GAs to come out of this year's Comun. And so to start off, I'd like to introduce the chairs, starting with Maneth Kulatunga, Ramudi Samarasekara, and Virat Alvis.
Good morning, everyone. I have the honor of introducing to you the United Nations Assembly on Drugs and Crime. My name is Maneth Kulatunga.
I am Virat Alvis.
So understanding that this is a new committee introduced, we are expecting extremely exciting delegates to come forward, and to propose specific solutions within our committee. So obviously, when it comes to new committee, the immediate question that lingers in your minds is what is the mandate of this specific committee? So in order to cover that, I'll be handing the stage over to Virat Dialvis.
The United Nations Assembly on Drugs and Crime was inspired by the UN's UNODC, but we will be simulating it as an assembly. For it, delegates are expected to know and understand their mandate. We know delegates don't usually do this, but it is very important for this committee as it is very new, and delegates to take part in it must understand its powers and functions. The UNADC is expected to act as the guardian of the UN's Palermo Convention, which is the UN's convention on transnational organized criminal activities. Within this, we must create and enforce legal frameworks within the topics of extradition, money laundering, trafficking, and of course, the illicit production and distribution of narcotics. Delegates, please know and understand your mandate, and please study and remember your study guides. All necessary information is available within it. It will be crucial to taking part in debate. With that, I would like to hand over the floor to Mane.
Yeah, so you will have to do something that delegates really forget to do, and that's to read the mandate. All right? So make sure you get that done, and all the functions and powers and everything is very clearly listed out in the study guide, so make sure you get that done. So right now I would cover the sort of delegate that we'll be expecting at the UNADC. What is required from a delegate that necessarily approaches this committee is someone who can cover a plethora of fields. That means this committee will be covering humanitarian issues, legal issues, security-based issues, so on and so forth, right? So you need to be well versed in all these things, and what is expected from you as a delegate is to find the root causes of a specific problem and approach those specific problems and come up with specific solutions with regards to those root causes. Alright, so that means you need to necessarily understand the history of what a situation entails and formulate specific frameworks to cater to the mistakes that have been done in the past. And in general, something that we are going to look at a lot is how delegates push their national agenda. That is extremely important for us, because at the end of the day, your national interests also should be encompassed within our debate, and we need to see how you effectively are to push that agenda within committee. So obviously, as the practice debates necessarily progress, we'll be helping you improve and push yourself forward throughout those specific debates. And we hope to see you as delegates who necessarily know how to negotiate, how to be diplomatic at the same time, and push your nation's agenda and be the key delegate who can play the role of the specific nation. So yeah. So with regards to our practice debates topics, I'll be handing this over to Ramli Samarasekar.
Thank you, Mane. So practice debate 1 reads mitigating the threat of corruption and the issue of transparency in the developing world. So what we want delegates to basically do is go into the grassroots levels of this issue and come up with viable solutions that introduce a comprehensive set of standards, measures, and rules that all countries can apply in order to strengthen their legal and governing regimes to fight corruption. Delegates must have a vast knowledge when it comes to tackling this issue, because it covers a multitude of issues such as bribery, trading in influence, exploitations of utilities, and various acts of corruption in the private sector. So moving on to practice debate 2, which reads discussing the issue of illicit trafficking / misuse of firearms and its threat to global security. And this basically discusses how illicit trafficking and misuse of firearms is basically linked to criminal organizations and networks as enablers of violent crimes, as instruments to perpetuate power, and as lucrative trafficking commodities that fuels crime, armed conflict, etc. Delegates must be able to effectively weigh out the effectiveness of the current measures and isolate loopholes within these current measures to come up with come up with certain solutions that can mitigate all of these issues successfully. Lastly, practice debate 3 reads, discussing the reformation of criminal justice systems in a view of reducing the risk of recidivism. With regards to this topic, delegates are expected to examine the effectiveness of current criminal justice systems with regards to curtailing recidivism. And delegates must keep in mind to look into the root causes of recidivism. With these topics in mind, we hope that delegates can grasp key concepts and gain a vast array of knowledge which they can apply for the conference. And now I hand it over to Manit.
So yeah, guys, don't be afraid about the Spanish part. It just means redefining counter narcotics. All right, so we just need to make it fancy too. But yeah, so if you necessarily notice how we've structured the committee, we've structured the practice debates in a way that it supplements your conference topic. So this means that you can explore specifics within your practice debates where you can improve on how comprehensive your solutions are and push forward your agendas when it comes to conference. So make sure you use your practice debates and add on to those things when it comes to conference, right? So the reasoning behind why we've necessarily come up with this topic is that an international coalition waged by what President Richard Nixon rather dubbed the war on drugs has been there for like 50 years, yeah? And half a century later, we see problems like drug trafficking, drug abuse, controversial topics like narco-terrorism coming up. So we don't necessarily see effective mechanisms to combat these issues. 50 years after the specific war on drugs has been executed, we see no improvement with regards to situation with illicit drug trade, yeah? So what we necessarily expect from you delegates is to formulate a completely new counter-narcotic strategy to actually deter the problems at hand. And we need you to understand the links between organized crime, illicit financial flows, corruption, and insurgency, and how drug trade contributes to that. So you'll have to analyze as to how all these factors are necessarily interlinked and address the specific issues that come with it. So yeah, so we like to keep our presentations short rather because we want delegates to improve within committee and we don't need to specifically spoon feed you in the workshop. So I'm pretty sure what we've said is clear, and I'm really looking forward for people to come into ADC because this is a new committee and you will be setting the benchmarks for all the preceding ODCs or ADCs that will be coming up in Comun. So make sure that this message is to student coordinators. Make sure that a really great bunch of delegates who know how to explore topics and who know how to necessarily formulate solutions and push their national agenda actually approach to this committee because it's a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people can gain a lot from this committee. So yeah, that's about it from me. I hope we can all meet, at least some of you, and I hope to have fun. Thank you.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, those three committees, GA3, GA4, and UNADC sums up our GAs. And so now I would like to call upon the chairs of all the respective committees that I just mentioned to come up on stage. And if anyone here present has any questions to ask any of them, particularly regarding topics, regarding any particular function of their committees, now would be the time.
Yeah.
Not in any way. It's just catered more towards novices. Yeah, it's catered more towards novices because we did pick slightly easier topics for everyone to understand, but it's in no way only catered towards novices because these topics are actually really broad and there's a lot of debate for very experienced delegates as well.
Just one more question to each committee. So it's far too often that in GAs that certain chairs end up expecting a lot of knowledge and application of international law, although it may not be in the mandate. Can each chair comment on what degree of international law should be applied and what sort of knowledge that delegates should be expected to have?
So with regards to the ADC, so obviously we, as said before, we function as the guardian of the Palermo Convention, yeah, the United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime. So obviously we expect delegates to draft legal frameworks, but we don't necessarily expect delegates to analyze the law per se. We don't expect them to go to specific articles and whatnot, but legal frameworks, we do expect that because we do appreciate the UN ODC, and the UN ODC consists of the CCPCJ. So definitely not up to like the degree where ICJ would hold international law, but up to a degree where they are capable enough to know how law is enforced, how enforcement can be done better, and necessary framework, like basically necessary guideline that a specific nation can rather follow. So yeah, that's about it. I hope that answers your question.
And for GA3, just like Manet said, there is a certain degree of law that needs to be known, like such as the R2P, the right to protect, and the principles that it's able to be invoked upon. But delegates of GA3 don't need to know a lot of law, because we are the people community, we are dealing with what the people's issues are, and they need to know just enough, not any specific legal conventions, and if there are, it's being mentioned in the study guide, but nothing like too big.
Okay, just to clarify, we don't run on discussion of law in our committees, but just the simple fact that if there are affiliations in terms of treaties or whatnot, the ICCPR and all of that, that sort of knowledge should be within delegates so that they know where to align. So essentially what our committees do is they discuss sort of policy and all that, right? So that is sort of where if there's a polarization, that is where it's heavier.
Yeah, guys, don't be afraid to ask. Yeah.
All right then. So now we would like to start off by discussing our 3 speccoms, and to start it all off, I would like to introduce the International Court of Justice, also known as the ICJ, last simulated in Comun in 2014, and so this has been quite a long time in the making. And we particularly wanted to simulate the ICJ this year because of a couple of reasons. We believe right now the delegate pool has once more returned to the capability where a committee dedicated to law is finally possible. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call upon the chairs, Isuru Abesekra and Felix Dima, to come up on stage.
Hi everyone, my name is Isuru. This is my friend Felix. We'll be chairing ICJ together. So a brief introduction as to what the ICJ is. The ICJ is the committee where countries go to resolve legal disputes. And the difference of the ICJ when it comes to all the other coms is the fact that the ICJ has judges, not delegates, and delegates are bound by foreign policy, whereas judges aren't. Also at the same time, we do not necessarily have a resolution as such, but we have something called an advisory opinion, and there's only one advisory opinion per ICJ session, sponsored by just one sponsor judge. And also at the same time, something else that we would like to point out is what we expect from judges in a typical ICJ. And first, this would firstly be the ability of judges to analyze what they're saying and to put forward an argument, because this isn't like any other committee. As I said before, they're not bound by foreign policy. It's not about furthering your political agenda, but rather furthering an argument when it comes to the topic at hand. Secondly, we also look forward to lobbying skills. This isn't something that's really looked at in an ICJ, but the issue is that because there is one sponsor judge and there's only one advisory opinion, the sponsor judge is a good indicator of who the best judge in an ICJ session is going to be.
All right, now to introduce the practice debate topics. All right. The first practice debate topic is related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with special regards to the legal status of the Palestinian state. And so what this is all about is it's kind of fundamentally resolving the contradiction present between the world slowly moving towards recognizing Palestine as a state and Israel continuing to settle in Palestinian claimed territory. And so what the delegates need, or what the judges need to do is come to a final decision on that and to approach this kind of problem that's been around for a long time. This has been one of the most discussed topics at any MUN. They need to approach this from a new angle, from a new unbiased and fresh perspective. And that's part of what is so great about the ICJ. Because they're judges, they can choose to approach this from a new angle and to find a permanent solution. The second practice debate topic is addressing the legality of the Turkish occupation of northern Cyprus. Now, when Turkey first occupied northern Cyprus in the aftermath of the conflict that occurred there, it was widely agreed that it was entirely legal and justified as a result of the 1960 Guarantee Treaty. But as time wore on and as the situation continued to develop, it's no longer clear as to whether Turkey's at fault or whether other nations involved in the conflict are at fault. So what we need are for the delegates to really dig into the timeline of that, how the issues evolved, and also resolve the fundamental questions of sovereignty and citizenship raised by the issue. The third practice debate topic is related to territorial claims in the Arctic Circle. And until pretty recently, this was one of the most stable areas in the world. But in recent years, countries have begun to breathe new life into this issue. So we really need delegates to talk about the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the Arctic Council and the verdicts it has reached. And the main question for this practice debate topic is resolving this, kind of evaluating the applicability of previous verdicts and treaties to the current problem. So now back to Isru to discuss the conference topic.
The conference topic is the US war on terror. And why exactly did we choose the US war on terror? One is because there is so much of scope to talk about in terms of international law. And secondly, it's something that's highly relevant. There's so many case studies ranging from Afghanistan to even Iraq, Syria, and so on. So what we expect as chairs for a typical ICJ judge to bring forward in committee would be a three-pronged approach. The first being, what exactly are the reasons for the US war on terror? Is the right to self-defense justified? Is the right to preemptive self-defense justified? Is the sovereignty of a country considered absolute? These are questions that delegates, judges are supposed to answer, and the only way of doing that is by giving us properly analyzed arguments. And the second part of it, which is the means of conducting the US war on terror. This is where international law comes in. There's international humanitarian law, there's so many conventions that are applicable, and we expect judges to question whether it's relevant in current status quo, and if it's not, why? And any recommendations that they have to replace these laws that are considered flawed, if they do come up with a stance like that. And thirdly, being whether the United States has an obligation to restore the status of countries it intervenes in. Is there a responsibility that comes through a legal source somewhere? Delegate judges would be expected to bring such questions out. And also at the same time, something that we would like to point out is the fact that in an ICJ, the stance that a judge can take is absolutely endless. A judge could even question whether the ICJ has the jurisdiction to discuss this topic, and we're open to things like that. They could use the ICJ statute to substantiate their claims. And by saying that, we would now like to conclude. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now introduce our next SpecCom, which will be the Futuristic Economics and Social Council, chaired by none other than Sahas Renuja and Senit Vanagasuriya.
Hi, good morning. I'm Senit Vanagasuriya. And I'm Sahas Gunasekara. and we will be chairing the Futuristic Economic and Social Council. Next slide, please. So the mandate of the FICOSOC. So the FICOSOC is basically a futuristic simulation of the ECOSOC. So it obviously has a very same mandate as the ECOSOC, which is stated in Chapter X, Article 61 to 72 of the UN Charter. So basically the FICOSOC will be responsible for dealing with economic, social and environmental issues of the UN.
And talking about how exactly we are going to simulate it, so it's basically ECOSOC, but however we are going to have dates of simulation, right? So how we are going to go about it is we are going to have the context of debate more or less happening in the future, right? So more or less what's going to happen is through the PDs, considering that there's going to be more or less quite a big gap. What you're going to do is your country matrix are constantly changing, but however PD3 and conference would more or less be the same countries that you actually get, right? And then talking about more or less as to how what exactly how exactly the build-up is going to be set up.
So we will be releasing the situational report, which contains a timeline until the date of simulation, approximately 5 days to a week before the actual date of session. So for example, if a PD is on the 7th, then the situational report will be released on the 1st of that month. That's about it for the mandate. So next slide, please.
So talking about exactly the experience level, right? So we don't necessarily see as to how exactly this is a novice sort of a com, right? We believe novices should preferably go more or less to comms like GA3, but considering there's a couple of reasons for this, right? Because the problem here is that we don't necessarily have a specific set topic per se. We more or less have a context. So what delegates are supposed to do is they're supposed to read the context and kind of prioritize the crux or prioritize as to what exactly the problems are there, right? So you obviously need experience in all sorts of fields, right? Whether it's international relation or whether it's outer space or what's it, right? So inherently what you need to do is you need to make sure that you're more or less a thorough, well-experienced delegate, or you're more or less going to be missing out. This doesn't mean that novices shouldn't necessarily come to FICOSOC, right? If you are a novice, we believe that you actually can gain a massive advantage over your peers if you're actually going to be more or less washed away in this particular experience, right? Talking about that.
Well, yeah, so to basically sum that up again, if you're a novice, you're more than welcome to come to the FICOSOC if you need experience, because this is going to be an amazing place for a novice to get experience. Also, the skill that we would prioritize the most is thinking on your feet and the ability to, critically and logically analyze a certain situation and come up with solutions. So moving on. So what you see on this slide is basically a very draft timeline that we hope to have. So PD1 is definitely going to take place in the year 2020, and PD2, PD3 and conference will it's a very draft idea right now. We haven't finalized it yet, but it will approximately there will be 10-year jumps.
Also adding on to that, so the normal idea of a crisis is that you have a crisis and you give your own particular causes on it, you give your own solutions, but the crisis and the solutions you give more or less are mutually exclusive, right? But however, in this scenario, whatever decisions that you do take in PD1 are actually decisions that you're going to be held accountable for throughout debate, right, until up to conference. So this more or less makes sure that delegates won't necessarily take drastic actions without essentially thinking of the consequences, right?
Definitely. So basically there is a continuity from the PDs to conference. So it is definitely advisable for the delegates of FICOSOC to not miss a single practice debate, as what happens in that practice debate definitely will affect the situational report and the crisis for conference.
So talking about the examples, so we're going to give you a couple of seconds here to kind of understand what's going on, right? So this is more or less a simple part of our situational report which we've added into our study guide. So what you need to do is you need to kind of read this and understand as to what exactly the problems are. So we're going to give a couple of seconds for that.
Yeah, can everyone at the back see and read this? So this is a very, very brief summary of the situational report we have included in our study guide. So a delegate of FICOSOC would be expected to properly analyze this and identify the impacts of this. For example, you could identify the impacts that this will have on exchange rates, on alternative sources of energy, and etc. etc. So a good delegate would critically analyze this and extrapolate from the information given and come up with solutions and other points of contention.
Also, to add on to that, more or less the vision of what exactly a best delegate would be in our com would be the delegate who's able to kind of prioritize the problems the military is actually given this, right? Because this isn't necessarily a crisis situation where you get status reports as debate goes through, but however you get the crisis or the situational report or the analysis of what happened in that particular year gap in the beginning, right? So more or less what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify the delegate who's able to identify and prioritize the problems and try to gain as maximum support and try to further their agenda in itself as well, right?
Yes. And yes, that's basically it about FIGUSOC. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, up next is our final SpecCom, and it will be the Futuristic Security Council, chaired by Anish Fonseca and Patrick de Kretzer.
Very good morning, esteemed faculty advisors, student coordinators, and delegates. I'm Anish, and this is Patrick, and we'll be your chairs for the Security Council. So here's what's going to happen today. First, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Sec Council and what's different this year. Then Patrick's going to expand on PD1 about the topic, give you a brief introduction, what he wants you all to talk about, and I'll sum up with what we want in the best delegate. Guys, could we go to the slide with the topics and the timeline? Okay, so some things to note about SC this year is that we will be a futuristic committee. The reason we've decided to be futuristic like last year is because we want to give delegates a bit more leeway when it comes to coming up with creative solutions. So right now, if you represent a country, you're really stuck to very specific policy concerns that that country has. But about 10 years in the future, delegates have a bit more flexibility, a bit more opportunity to be creative. So especially those experienced delegates or delegates who are well versed in foreign affairs and current issues will have the opportunity to really flex their muscles and see what it's like to be an actual delegate coming up with creative solutions on their own. That being said, you will be expected to stick to the best interest of your country. It's just you have a bit more flexibility. So practice debate 1, as you may have noticed, is set in 2018. The reason is because some of you delegates, even if you are not novices, it may be your first time in the SC, we want to give you all opportunity to have a better understanding of how the SC works, make a good first impression, get to know your chairs and delegates. We will be going futuristic from PDs to free and conference. Another thing you need to note about conference delegates is that our country matrix is going to be changing. So between PD1 and PD2, the countries will be changed. Between PD2 and PD3, again the countries will be changed. Now the reason that's happening is because in the actual Security Council, the non-permanent countries always rotate, and since you want to be a bit realistic, we are going to be doing the same thing here. The countries you have in PD3 will be the same as the countries you have in conference, so you have a bit more time to get ready with those countries. You will also be given up-to-date study guides for your topics for PD3 and conference about 2 weeks prior to the actual debate. The reason is because everything that you do in the course of practice debates is going to be affecting the context and the future that you have when you have conference or when you have debate. And in order to be more dynamic, we will not release your study guides until the previous session of debate is over. Okay, delegates, so without further ado, Patrick's now going to expand on PD1 and give you a brief idea.
Okay, so PD1 will basically be about the South China Sea, and I expect that a fair few of you already know about what's going on there, but just the briefest of introductions to it. It's a major geopolitical crisis that's occurring in Southeast Asia over the territorial waters which China has claimed. And basically what we at FSC are mainly looking for is adaptability and creativity, and an example of this is, of course, one of the key things we want to expect delegates to look at is for example, the Association for Southeast Asian Nations and China's Free Trade Agreement, which was basically an agreement which occurred between China and the ASEAN nations, in which they agreed on a mutual area to associate with free trade, and it was actually intended as a solution to the crisis at hand. But of course, the biggest problem was with the mandate that they put down was that it was very vague. It did not address the issue of the territorial waters, and the territorial claims were not addressed in the resolution, and therefore no problems were actually solved. So therefore, what we really want delegates to do is that we want them to come in with the knowledge of the free trade agreement. We want them to analyze and address what the problems were, and we want them to come up with creative solutions to that problem. And secondly of all, we also want delegates to come up with and address the issues of such as the militarization of the Southeast Asian Sea. Basically, like how China has now militarized, they've increased their navy patrols in response to America sending in naval patrols of their own, and therefore this huge upbringing, this huge development in military forces has turned the entire conflict into a new Cold War era. So what we really want adaptable delegates. We want delegates, for example, the delegate of China. We want that delegate of China to really push for his own policy, but at the same time, we also want him willing to compromise as well. We want to see just how adaptable delegates can be in a futuristic committee, because as we know, it's going to be set in 2018, and it's going to be a developing crisis. So we really want delegates who have the real knowledge of what their countries have been doing beforehand, and with the knowledge of what they're going to be doing. What are their next steps? Where are we going to go from this? Where they're going to be? What compromises they're going to make? Like, for example, how the Philippines and Vietnam have come up and they've made a compromise themselves. How they've agreed to solve a certain territorial dispute, but of course the only problem was that they didn't take into account what China was going to think, which was naturally the huge problem. But basically, that's again just a brief overview of what we're looking for, and
okay.
Now I'm back.
Cool. So now we've told you what SC is going to be about. So that's about us telling you what you can expect. Now we're going to tell you what we expect from delegates who show up to Security Council. So guys, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you the system by which we judge awards, and you guys need to figure out if you're capable of doing it. We're not some pretentious, condescending SC that thinks it's better than everyone else. Okay, if you're a novice delegate, if you're an inexperienced MUNer, that's fine. You can come to Sec Council, but at your own risk. We will expect delegates to be professional. So what is the way in which we are going to be judging delegates? The fundamental metric is going to be how you represent the best interests of your country, which means that at the end of the day, as debate flows, as resolutions are made, we want to ensure that you do everything in your capacity to ensure that your country benefits. And at the end of the day, the guy whose country benefits the most, or girl, sorry, the delegate whose country benefits the most at the end of debate is going to be the delegate that walks away with best delegate. Ashan is laughing at me when I said girl, I don't know why, right? Right. So guys and girls, delegates, right? So that's the first fundamental metric, right? Representing your country's best interests. We will also be looking at your speeches, that's secondary. We'll be looking at the content of your speeches, the analysis in your speeches. But if you are not really eloquent public speakers, if your pronunciation is bad, if you're not entertaining speakers, that's fine. We will not be marking you like that based on how well you speak. All we care about is what you say. But keep in mind that if you're not a very fluent speaker, or if you're not a very interesting speaker, your committee is not going to listen to you, and you're not going to be able to control them. And at the end of the day, we are also going to get a bit bored after we've gone to so many sessions of debate to pay attention to you if you're not really a very interesting speaker. I mean, Patrick's only human, and the alien race that I come from doesn't have a long attention span. So you need to ensure that you have the capacity to grab your audience, even though you not be directly marked for it. Okay, to sum up, delegates, that's basically what Sec Council is going to be. Come to Security Council if you have the experience to pull it off. Come to Security Council if you actually want to come up with creative, innovative solutions. And I think now we have a Q&A session, Amanda. Right, well done, Amanda. Good.
Thank you. All right, so once more, like before, I'll be calling up all the chairs from the Futuristic Security Council, the National Court of Justice, and the Futuristic Economics and Social Council to answer any questions that you may have regarding the procedure, topics, etc. for any of these committees.
Yes, the gentleman in the glasses.
Well, true enough. However, we need there to be a certain continuity. So when Sahas said that the delegate representing the country has to maintain basically work towards the best interests of the country, that is the case. However, after all, it is the head table that does make the study guides or the situational reports, and the head table will definitely take care to not make sure that a certain country is disadvantaged. Also, that is the very reason that we have the same that we give delegates the same country that they get for PD3 for conference.
Secondly, in terms of mandate, how much of focus will there be on econ, or will it also have aspects of like security and humanitarian stuff?
Well, we will be simulating the ECOSOC mandate as it is. So our committee will have the same amount of economics and the same amount of security. If there will be any security related aspects that a normal ECOSOC would have.
Delegate, you would appreciate it. You stood when you addressed the head table. It's basic decorum, delegate. It's fine now.
Okay, right. I'm a faculty advisor, so I need to suppose I have your permission to sit down and ask, yeah?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
First question, this is for the SG. Are we allowed, are our delegates, like my OSC delegation, they go for the first PD and they find that they are not quite suited for that council. Are they allowed to change? And if so, what is the deadline? And will it be put up on the website?
Yes, ma'am, we were going to address that in a little bit, but it's all right. And so, yes, all delegates, after then, up until the first practice debate, they're allowed to choose their committees. And let's say they go into one of the committees and find that for some reason they don't feel like they can contribute, or they feel overwhelmed, or as long as there's a valid reason, there is definitely a possibility to change committees. However, the deadline for this remains till the end of the first practice debate. If the appropriate faculty advisor lets the executive committee know via direct email or informing our Comun faculty advisor, then we can definitely organize a change and try and switch around the delegates. However, as I stated, it remains the first practice debate. From the second practice debate onwards, no further changes can be allowed. And regarding the second point, all of this information will be provided on the website and also will be sent once more via an email reminder.
The other delegating classes?
So just to ICJ, firstly, how will the procedure work? And secondly, because delegates aren't expected to research on a foreign policy, how would you guide them to research as judges?
Procedure would be normal procedure, and research would be international lobbying, international conventions, etc. That's illustrated in the study guide, the sources of international law in the ICG statute that we drafted. Thank you.
Into SC, are there going to be resolutions, or how will it?
So Security Council passes resolution. Okay, fine. Just to clarify, we are a futuristic committee, but we will be having this traditional mandate of the Security Council. As said before, the only reason we are futuristic is just to give you a bit more leeway when it comes to broad foreign policy aspects, but beyond that, we expect you to realistically simulate the actual Security Council to the best of your abilities. So you will have a normal SC mandate with normal SC procedure. The other delegating classes. 9 delegate. Continue. The Futuristic Security Council and the Futuristic Economic and Social Council will both be changed in the country matrix. You will be notified through email, but the changes will also be put up on the website. Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Could you say it a bit louder, please?
Are you guys variating the allocation of the countries based on the performance of the delegates in the practice debate? On what basis?
Well, we will be staying as random as possible, but I mean, there will be, if delegates do perform very well, we may reward them with countries which give them the opportunity to speak further. But to be honest, the Secretariat and the Executive Committee are still deliberating on if we are going to introduce a system to which we allot the countries, but right now we think it will probably just be random.
Any further questions?
Anyone without glasses want to ask a question?
All right, and prior to us moving along, I would like to mention the fact that this year, in our 6 committees, we've done something that's fundamentally different. We've broken away from the traditional norm, 3 standard GS, 3 standard speccoms. Ladies and gentlemen, recognize the fact that we've changed the 3 standard GS to incorporate the 2 fundamentally important ones, but also incorporate a third one, the UNADC, which is a brand new committee that deals with all the elements of GA1, but also does far more. And then furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 futuristic committees. That has never been done before, either in Comun or any other MUN conference in Sri Lanka. So that is a tremendous comment upon the capabilities of the chairs we have today. Alongside, finally, our sixth committee, which is the National Court of Justice. Never hasn't been simulated for a while since 2014. So once more, this is our faith in both our chairs and our delegate pool, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to comment upon our crisis. Crisis this year will actually revolve as two separate entities. Formerly, SpecComs didn't really engage in collective crisis. However, this year, even though we have two futuristic committees, we will still have two separate crises ongoing. The GAs will have their standards crisis in the main ballroom, and the SpecComs will have their own will have their own unique crisis, which will automatically mean that this is not merely a crisis just to take up time, but rather, ladies and gentlemen, this is a crisis which will actually incorporate awards. We as a secretariat and as a whole executive committee feel that we need to award and recognize the effort that delegates put up when thinking on the spot and working in a crisis situation alongside other delegates who represent their same country. Which is why, ladies and gentlemen, we felt that both committees will be both different crises will be awarded their own best delegation awards in order to recognize the effort put in by delegates. So, are there any questions regarding the crisis for the moment? All right. Seeing none, I would like to hand the floor over to Dinul Hettiarachi, our head of admin, to talk to you a little bit about the logistical details of conference.
Thank you, Amanda. So, organizing a conference of this magnitude is purely a logistical nightmare, yeah? So, first of all, increase delegate fees, admin fees, and school registration fees. Let's get real. You don't need a FECASOC delegate to explain to you the mechanism behind inflation because it's pretty obvious and it's all around us, yeah? And another reason being, when I initially started off my MUN career, oblivious old me was intrigued by the third day of conference. That is the whole cinnamon grant experience. And this time, your prayers have been answered. We're getting the grant for the third day of conference. And likewise, the delegate fees have been increased to 7,000 rupees, admin fees to 6,500 rupees, and the school registration fees to 7,500 rupees. So faculty advisors, kindly make a note of that. And all these payments are due by the first practice debate. And the application procedure this time is a bit different. So for private delegates and admins, you can fill the application online, and then there's a different printed application that will, you'll get that link on the online application, yeah? So you basically just have to print that out and hand it over to us by the first practice debate. And for schools, you'll just have to hand over the printed one, but fill up the online application as well, and just hand over the printed one to your faculty advisors. And all this is due by the first practice debate. And faculty advisors, kindly make a note that due to the time lag of accepting checks, we'll actually be accepting cash payments this time. And for international delegates that are joining us on the live stream, you may also fill the online form, and the payment should be transferred to the OSC bank account, and the bank details will be provided in the invitation. The printed application form should be handed over to us when you arrive in Sri Lanka on the 8th of March or before. And just a reminder to all the faculty advisors that they should just check their emails regularly, as most of the updates will be sent to them. We'll be communicating with the delegates through the faculty advisors. And most of our updates will be posted on our website and social media pages. And that's mainly Instagram and Facebook. And if there are any faculty advisors or student coordinators that haven't been receiving our emails rather, kindly send us an email to comun@osc.lk and we will add you to our mailing list. With regards to punctuality rules, in order to be eligible for awards, delegates and admins should have attended at least 2 practice debates. So how this time's conference will work is the first 2 days of conference will be at OSC and the third day at Cinnamon Grand. And for PDs, you may, the canteen food will be available, and a sponsor of Comun 2018, that is Keels, has agreed to actually set up a food stall. So you may bring money and you may buy the food there as well. And the registration forms will be out today at 2:30 p.m. So you may start registering right away. And now I'd like to introduce Heshan and Jivanta, who are head and deputy head of community service respectively. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Heshan. I'm your head of community service. And so for this year, Comun's going to be partnering with the Wise Foundation. It's a non-profit NGO, and we're going to be supporting the Project Hope, which is basically finding school supplies for needy school kids. The next slide, please. Right, so basically, each school is going to have to contribute a minimum number of packages, and this number of packages is going to be determined by this formula, 0.16 in the number of secondary students. So basically, secondary students are anyone from grade 7 to the graduating class. And then once you reach the limit, any packages above the limit will gain you 20 points. Packages within the limit will gain you 10 points. And so Jivanta will continue.
Hi, I'm Jivanta. I'll be the deputy head of community service this year. Moving on with the list, as everyone can see, the list is on the presentation. I hope every school can write that list down, because that will be the final list that should be sent in each packet. So it will be one school bag, one shoe voucher. We, as the EXCO, recommend a shoe voucher from the DSI to be sent on in these packets, and that worth 1,000 rupees in each packet. Moving on, we also need a lunch box, a water bottle, 12 single rule books, 3 square rule books, 7 pens, which will be including 3 black pens, 3 blue pens and 1 red pen, 5 pencils, 3 erasers and 1 mathematical box. So we are going to calculate the minimum value of these packets by using the formula as mentioned by Eshan, and we'll be sending an email just after this workshop within this week to every school asking for the estimated value of secondary school students who are there in your schools, and we expect a reply from each school within a week so that we can calculate the minimum and send it to schools as soon as possible to have their advertising purpose more easier. And we'll be starting for the collection of these packets by the first practice debates, and we'll be closing the collection by the third practice debate, and still we will be accepting further packets which will be given even after the third practice debate, but those packets which are given after the third practice debate will not be counted for the point system. Moving on, each package will be given to one student who needs these things. Also, we as a EXCO clearly wanted to mention about the thing that the package should be packed and sealed, and also every school should send the packets with their logo and school and what are inside those packets labeled on the outside of the box. So that would make the point system allocation easier and counting easier. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce my deputy heads of administration, and they are Takesha, Heshika, and Manji. And Manji and Takesha will now talk to you about dress code for our conference.
Hello everyone, my name is Takesha Jayaratna. So for the 3 conference days, the dress code is going to be, for the first 2 conference days, the dress code is going to be formal. And for the last conference day, the dress code is going to be formal, and national clothes is also allowed. Also, just make sure that none of the delegates or the admins wear print shirts, so for example, Hawaiian shirts. And for the practice debates, smart casual is allowed. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Manju Amarasekara. So for girls, for practice debates, we don't want to see any sleeveless, so anything that exposes your shoulders. And when it comes to dresses and skirts, it has to be quite long, so up to your fingertip length. For practice debates, you can wear smart casual, no flip-flops. And for the free conference debates, the first two you can wear formal, and the last day you can wear formal or your national costume. Also, girls, please do not wear anything transparent material or anything like that. Thank you.
And our head of technology for Comun 2018 is Ananda Veera Singer, who is up there and making all this possible. So from a technological point of view, there will be internet access during conference thanks to one of our sponsors, Dialog. And the OSC website is up, and we'd suggest that you make it a favorite tab on your phones right away because most of our updates will be on there. And the study guides, including the link to the application form, will be available on our website from 2:30 p.m. today. So please make a note of that. And following conference, the point system will be made available on our website for a period of 3 months following conference to ensure transparency and fairness. And now I'd like to call upon our SG, Amanda, to talk about important dates leading up to conference.
Alright, so we're going to be briefly discussing the important dates. And so to start off with, our first practice debate will be on the 21st of January.
And then the second practice debate is on the 10th of February.
Followed by the third on the 17th of February.
And then it's the first 2 days of conference, which are the 9th and 10th of March, which will be held at overseas.
And our final day of conference, which will be held on the 11th at the Cinnamon Grand. And so that pretty much roughly sums up our overall workshop. However, we would like to point out that any further information that you'd like to have or any information shared through this workshop will be shared through both the Comun formal Comun email as well as the website. Now, I believe that overall sums up workshop for the moment. However, if anyone has any particular questions that they'd like to ask from the chairs or ourselves, the secretary, we'll all be having a brief informal session outside in the foyer area. So, yeah, before we start.
This one that might help everyone.
Yep.
So, is internet access allowed for delegates to use their phones and laptops during committee? Yes.
It will be available, however, it will be monitored by the chairs.
When we say monitored by the chairs, what we mean directly is two things. A, it will be monitored by the admins, and B, it will be monitored by an internet firewall that we are putting in place. Which brings me to another statement regarding submission of documents to the chairs. We will be putting it through a server in order to ensure that all documents sent through go through the system called Turnitin to prevent plagiarism occurring of any sort, especially for things like the foreign policy statement or the judicial opinions for the ICJ. Yeah? So the internet access is anyway allowed only for the spec comms because of the pure number, because it would allow an unfair advantage in the larger GA communities because delegates, it would disadvantage the entire overall group. However, in the smaller spec comms, they would be allowed. And in relation to whether or not the possibility for research, the ICJ, for example, they would allow you to look up a particular legal document if someone were to bring it up. If a delegate were to bring up a particular declaration, for example, the other delegates, or rather, the other judges have the liberty to use the internet in order to find. However, in certain other committees, it's not for the purposes of research, but to rather streamline the overall process. Any further questions before we wrap this up? All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We hope to see you soon at the first practice debate. Thank you for coming.
Like,